All right, my lovers, thank you for tuning in to the video. It's been a while since I've made videos. I've had some issues in my life, but that being said, we're back. And for those of you who are interested in dorky bike content and arguing over bike components and things like that, I'm here to make more videos. Now, this year it's a new year, so we're gonna start off with a little bit of good news. I've been in contact with a few companies, and I think I might be able to get some gear to try for the channel. I'm really crossing my fingers that one of those items is a bike. As you know, if you've watched my videos, I really love Poseidon. I've fallen in love with Poseidon bikes over the course of time, and I've been in talks with them, so hopefully I can get some gear for them to review, because I'd really like to try a few more of their products. This video in particular, the reason I made a video about Poseidon and they're a nice budget company, and some people in the comments section have an issue when you use the word budget and then you talk about a $1,000 bike. You know, I bought the Redwood for my partner for about $600 with it shipped. I bought the X for about $500 with it shipped. So that's two bikes for under $1,000. Now, I did do modifications to both of those bikes, which made them ultimately more expensively spec'd than they were at stock. But I love it because they create bicycles that are, some of them are quick release that you could upgrade to thru-axle, and that's where we're kind of in that era of bicycles for the last 10 years or so, where it's been switching from the quick release to thru-axle frames. Now, you do not need a thru-axle frame. They are considered modern spec to get a thru-axle frame and thru-axle wheel sets, but it's not necessary. And things you have to consider is the type of wheels, the type of upgrades you make when you have thru-axle bikes. Are there parts available for the quick release spec? Yes, there are. There's still a bunch of stuff out there for quick release, so you don't need a thru-axle bike, but there are some advantages to having a thru-axle bike. If you like doing a little bit of riding off-road, there's a little bit of stiffness that they add, and just ability to ride over rugged surfaces. They give you a little better edge at that. Also, with thru-axles, pretty much I would say that's the main thing. If you think you're gonna be going off-road for extended periods of time, like if you're just going short jaunts over gravelly paths, it's not that big a deal. But if you're gonna be riding like miles and miles and miles of gravel type surfaces, then it is not a bad idea to have a thru-axle. Now, you look at the prices of thru-axle frames and you're like, golly, like why are these thru-axle frames so expensive, and why is a budget bike at $1,000 considered a good deal for a thru-axle frame versus when I can just get a quick release? Now, if you're doing traditional touring, you're staying on the road, you're staying on bike paths, I wouldn't even bother worrying about a thru-axle, because there are so many great used bikes and new bikes that are gonna give you a price break, especially if you're a roadie. It's not necessary. As far as things like tubeless tires, you don't need those when you're going on paved paths. Those are more specs that you want, that are innovations for off-road for extended periods of time. Because let's face it, people still ride like mountain bikes with tubes in them, I'm saying, with quick releases over dirt surfaces, and they work for them. So you're never gonna hear me saying, you have to have one or the other, or one is better than the other. The best bike is the one that you have access to, right? The best thing you can do is whatever bike you can get, just make the most out of it. And that mentality will have you having fun on the bike, if that's your goal. If your goal are things like speed, and you're competitive, these are other things. But this channel is really about trying to advocate for bikes in general and get people on bikes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why, because I've always had this question, why are thru-axle frames more expensive? And so I did a little research, and it turns out, as you watch videos, that there are a few reasons. Now, one of the reasons is the precision engineering of thru-axle frames. Thru-axle frames, they require tighter tolerances during manufacturing to ensure compatibility with the frame, the fork, the wheels, and the hubs. This adds a little bit of complexity and cost compared to the traditional quick release systems. Now, also, that's point number one. Point number two, the material and the design. The components and reinforcements needed for thru-axle compatibility are often involve stronger materials or additional engineering, particularly for the dropout. So it looks like just the engineering process, the materials process adds cost. Improved performance. Now, here's why you would want a thru-axle frame if you were considering it, is that there is an improved stiffness. The thru-axle enhances the stiffness of the wheel frame connection, improving handling and power transfer. Now, as someone who's ridden on a thru-axle and the old quick release stuff, that you can feel that. Like if you ride enough, you can really feel that, like your power transfer and the stiffness, because it's not wiggling in the thru-axle. And sometimes if you don't put that thru-axle on tight, it can really affect the stiffness. So you can feel that. You can feel the power transfer just be a little bit greater in a thru-axle. Again, not necessary because you can still go very, very fast on a quick release bike. But off-road, that stiffness and that handling when you're going on dirt or uneven surfaces, especially when you combine that with wider tires, you feel it. There's an improvement in safety. They provide a more secure fit, reducing the likelihood of a wheel detachment. Like I said, sometimes you don't put that wheel in as super straight as you could when it's a quick release. There are times, especially with the back wheel, if you're struggling with that, it can be tough at times. So the thru-axle kind of, the thru-axle, it's difficult to put the back wheel on. You just kind of got to get used to it. But it improves the safety overall. And so far, as far as going downhill, my handling and everything, there are combinations of things that have made me feel a lot safer. And because I'm not a speed demon, I'm more like fun. I'm looking for fun. One of the things, because I live in such a hilly place, is you want to feel secure going downhill. And on all the bikes that I have that have been thru-axle, it's a combination of geometry, wheel width, but I definitely feel more secure going downhill. Now, also is that disc brake compatibility. Most thru-axle bikes are designed for disc brakes, which also require a more precise alignment and additional reinforcement. So again, it just goes back to that precision in the engineering. As that goes up, it's gonna be reflected in the cost that the end user pays for the bike. Now, thru-axles are relatively newer. So manufacturers invest in research and development, driving up the initial cost. So what we're saying in that is it'll probably come down over time as they become more standardized and through quick release. I don't know if quick release, I honestly don't know if, how strong the market is for quick release in terms of the future. But if thru-axles become more of the norm, you'll see the prices go down a little bit. And the target audience, thru-axles are typically found on higher end bikes aimed at performance-oriented riders, justifying the price point. So people who are competitive are going to use thru-axle bikes. Again, does that mean you who's just riding for fun need that? No, but often the innovations that are made for performance trickle down to the rest of us and we get to feel the benefits. And so as we're looking at the Poseidon bike company, I think it's a beautiful bridge between the thru-axle future and the quick release that we were raised on. And so you really don't need a quick release bike. It's not something that I would say someone needs to buy or needs to, if you're just trying to get into riding, because there are still quick release bikes that have disc brakes. So, it's kind of inching you up to that point. And you'll see reflected in the price that when a bike is completely thru-axle, it's gonna cost more. And at this point, when I say budget bike, if you're spending about $1,000 on a complete bike that's thru-axle, it's a good deal just because the technology is new. Now you're gonna get mechanical shifting at that price point, but do you need more? So I would argue that you do not need a thru-axle bike, but if you're going off-road and you're wanting to do gravel adventures or mountain bike adventures, I would probably advise that, you know, seeing if you can find a cheap frame and then modifying that. But again, it's not necessary. If you look at someone like Tim Fitzwater's channel, he rides a lot of off-road, you know, off the beaten path. Like I would say he's mostly a roadie, but he goes off on gravel paths quite a bit. And I feel like a lot of his bikes are quick release. And he's, you know, he's never mentioned anything about that. Me being a dork, I'm more like a techie dork. I'm just, you know, I just nerd out on bike specs, and I'm always like, well, why is this? Why is that? Why is this? So, you know, thus the making of this video. So get in the comment section and let me know what you think. If you've someone who's switched from quick release to through axle, what differences do you notice? Do you notice anything that's an improvement? Or if you're looking to try a through axle and you've never have before, are you curious? You know, let me know. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. I'm always going to try to check it and get with y'all. So thank you so much for watching. And hopefully in the next few videos, I'll be able to show some new gear.